Hello everyone, this is CJ with Cycletron. Well, last Friday, April 23rd, I had the opportunity to demo a variety of Indian motorcycles. So I did. I got there first thing in the morning. The demo ride started at 9:30. It was about 45 degrees, cloudy with a threat of rain. So the turnout initially was quite low. I was happy with that because that meant I should be able to cycle through a number of bikes. So I ended up riding 5 Indian bikes. This video is not intended to be a detailed review of each of these bikes, but rather to provide my overall impression of the bikes, and in particular compare them uh, to how they stack up to Harley Davidson motorcycles in terms of a variety of criteria that struck me as just a rider, just feedback from riding the motorcycles. So with that, let's get started. First up is the Indian Challenger Dark Horse, shown here in the white smoke color. I'll tell you right off the bat, this was my favorite bike on the demo ride. Absolutely love this bike. A lot of power, lots of torque, more modern styling compared to, well, obviously traditional styling. A lot of electronics. It's got a 7-inch infotainment touchscreen, 6-gallon tank, tips the scales at 831 pounds wet, which is comparable to my Street Glide Special. The test route was in Olathe, Kansas. You know, I understand on these routes they got to put safety first, so you've got a marshal up front and a marshal at back in the back. Unfortunately, they elected to keep the speeds at around 35 miles an hour, so I'm not going to be able to rate the flat out performance of a bike like this, but for the range of speeds that we are able to do on the bike, I can compare it to the range of speeds I've had on other bikes. But you know, this has been a really good bike for Indian, and of course it's only been out as a 2020 and 2021 model, and it's got the 122 horsepower, 128 foot-pound torque, 108 cubic inch liquid cooled engine. It's got 6-axis IMU technology for ABS and traction control, 6-gallon tank, 26 and a half inch seat height. It was a blast to ride this bike. The only unusual thing I noticed about the bike is the bar seemed to be a little high. And I looked at photos of the bike on Indian's website, and the bar seemed to be set a little lower. So that seems to be some type of adjustment made for this demo bike. I wasn't uncomfortable with the higher bar positions. I just was a little surprised by it. I'm 6 foot, weigh 185 pounds, so I was quite comfortable on the bike. It's just a higher bar position than I have on my Street Glide Special that I'm accustomed to. But I really like this bike. Next up is the Indian Springfield Dark Horse. Has a 116 cubic inch air-cooled Thunderstroke engine, which works out to be 1,890 cc's, 120 foot-pounds of torque, 26-inch seat height, 5.5-gallon fuel capacity, and a 790-pound wet weight. MSRP is around $22,500. And I really like this bike. I think the looks are pretty solid. Fit and finish is good. If you know the styling's more of a throwback styling, if that's your thing. The thing that I didn't really care too much about was the high bar position on this bike, and I really don't understand with forward controls why you want real high bars like that. Um, you know, in the U.S., apparently, according to the internet anyway, the average height of a male in the United States is 5 feet 9 inches tall, and it's 5'11" in Europe. So tall bars and forward foot position has you kind of hunched over. You could see that even in the stock photos they had on their website with 2 different riders as an example. So again, it wasn't particularly uncomfortable, just not my personal choice. I would like to have the bars a little lower and a little closer to me as a rider. Uh, these are just very specific choices that Indian has made for these model bikes, and they seem to be really going after the custom look. The the cast wheels look fantastic on this bike. I think this is a pretty good looking bike. Um, I don't know. I guess if I was being nitpicky, I'm not sure exactly if some days I like that fender, that wraparound fender with the Indian head logo light on the top, and some days I think it's too much. And same with the headlight nacelle, that shroud that goes around the headlight. It's kind of a unique look, but I think it works overall. The bike was comfortable, lots of power, lots of torque with that 116 cubic inch engine. So I liked this bike. Third up is the Indian Chief Dark Horse, $17,000 MSRP. Again, the 116 cubic inch Thunderstroke engine. It offers the 4-inch circular ride command display, 4-gallon tank, 26-inch seat height, 670-pound wet weight, and it's a really fantastic looking bike. And so I had pretty high hopes for this bike, and was quite disappointed when I rode it. I can't think of a time when I've been more uncomfortable on a motorcycle than I was on this one. And everybody's body's different, different conditioning and things like that. But the position of this bike is you've got low flat bars, and then you've got what they call mid controls, but they're really midway between mids and forward controls. So they're like mid, as I call it. So it's an awkward get ready to pop out of the water while you're water skiing position, or you're mid-flight on a trapeze kind of thing with your feet and hands forward. It's I didn't like it at all. Frankly, I felt very strongly that they essentially ruined the bike with their ergonomic choices. Now maybe it's going to work for other people. You'll see after I rode this bike, I switched over later on to the FTRS, and there was an older guy, probably 5'6", riding the Indian Chief Dark Horse. I'd say, yeah, at 5'6", he was almost doubled over. I didn't have a chance to ask him how comfortable he was on the bike, but it didn't look like a position I'd want to endure for very long. I cramped up when I started riding that bike, and I, for a moment, thought about circling back to the parking lot and just say, next. So just odd. I mean, who's Indian making this bike for? I guess the Bobber's got better ergonomics, Indian Chief Bobber, but it's over $19,000. So this bike at $17,000 is not cheap, but to have a bike like that's for me unrideable, I just couldn't wrap my head around it. Next, we've got the Indian Scout 20, 69 cubic inch liquid cooled engine, produces about 100 horsepower, 72 foot-pounds of torque, 27.4 inch seat height, 570 pound wet weight. I like this bike. I'll just tell you now, my 3 favorite Indian bikes that I rode on this demo out of the 5 were the Challenger, this Scout, and the FTR. But I think this bike is a lot of fun. I personally, with my prior experience with sport bikes and bigger touring bikes, I think this would be a fun second in-town bike for me, or if you're maybe a little smaller in stature or maybe newer to riding, this would be a good bike for you. It's a lot of fun, 100 horsepower is plenty of oomph, so it'll go. I really like the bike. It's for me at 6 foot, it's a little smallish, but not terribly so. But again, I'd be using this as an in-town bike and not a touring bike, which this really isn't intended to be a touring bike, although I know some people use it for that. But very, very solid bike. The Indian Scout 20 as tested was about $14,000, so that includes a premium color selection. So not exactly cheap. Now we move on to the FTR S. I keep wanting to say FTR Sport, which I suppose that's what that stands for. 73 cubic inch liquid cooled V-twin engine, produces 120 horsepower, 87 foot-pounds of torque. Little taller seat height compared to the other Indians at 30.7 inches. 514-pound wet weight, 3.4 gallon tank. Obviously, this is to look like a flat tracker, more sport-oriented bike for around town and short hops. This bike was a complete blast. Unfortunately, that guy that I mentioned who was hunched over on the Indian Chief Dark Horse, I don't think managed to get above 30 miles an hour, and I was hoping to get separated from him at a light, and it never happened. So uh, consider a demo of a sport bike where you're not going over 30 miles an hour, and that was my experience. So I'm going to go more with the feel of the bike. I think it's more suited for taller riders. I've got a 34-inch inseam. I think this is a bike you'd really want to flat foot if you could. I'm not a big fan of tiptoes at a stop. I've never had that experience, but I've seen other people do that. Comes with a lot of performance features. I think it's a great bike. I like to see Harley introduce more performance bikes like this, and maybe with the Pan America platform they will. But a great bike. So again, my three favorite Indian bikes out of the five were all liquid cooled: the Challenger, the Scout, and the FTR. And my favorite air cooled bike was the Springfield, and that's not even close. I mean, in terms of looks, I like the Indian Chief Dark Horse, but that was just positively miserable to ride. So let's get into how I big picture compare Indian motorcycles as they sit right now compared to Harley Davidson motorcycles in terms of my personal opinion. So number five, Indian makes great bikes. I think it's really up to individual preference whether you go with Indian or Harley Davidson. Uh, Indian, I think, is inclined to introduce more technology, and they certainly have more liquid cooled models in their lineup. Harley only has one with the Pan America. So uh, great bikes. If someone chooses an Indian over a Harley or vice versa, neither one of them is wrong. There is no wrong in this situation. They're both great brands of motorcycles. Number four, Harley Davidson has Indian beat all day long on their paint. It's not even close. They closed the Harley factory in Kansas City in the beginning of 2019, and that 500,000 square foot factory included a paint booth that supposedly cost Harley $30 million to build, and they were trying to sell that plant for 26 million. And somebody just bought it 4 months ago, a fitness company, to use as a warehouse and distribution center. But before that happened, I thought, man, what if Indian bought that factory just for the paint booth and up their game on the paint? Now, don't get me wrong, the more premium paint schemes on the Indians look great, but you are paying quite a bit of money for them, and I think they fall way short of Harley's paint. I mean, just as an example, look at this snake venom paint scheme where it changes from green to purple, and you've got the Harley Davidson #1 logo under the clear coat. I mean, they just kill it on paint, and everybody knows it, and they have for years. And I'm not saying Indian paint schemes or quality is bad or poor. It's just it's not premium in my view, and they could make their bikes look so much better if they paid more attention to that. Number three, in my opinion, Indian really needs to fix their ergonomics on these bikes. It's outrageous to me that Indian Chief Dark Horse would be so uncomfortable to ride. And again, not every bike is for every person, but I've never been uncomfortable on another motorcycle like I was on this bike. I mean, I'm comfortable on every Harley I've ever ridden. I also ride sport bikes. Now, I don't think I've tried to ride an R1 in recent memory, so maybe I'd have some issues there, but for the type of bikes I've been riding at my age, smaller sport bikes and big cruisers and touring bikes, they all fit me like a glove, and this one was way out in left field, and the tall bars on the Springfield Dark Horse was kind of an odd choice too, in my view. Number two, Indian dealer network is much smaller than the Harley Davidson dealer network. I mean, it's understandable if you're selling a fifth of the motorcycles. And of course, Harley Davidson's dealer network shrunk by over 100 dealerships in the last year. But still, Harley Davidson dealerships are widespread across the United States compared to Indian. And number one, because I think the pricing of Indian motorcycles and Harley Davidson are comparable. They're not cheap in either case. And I think Indian tends to put more of a premium on performance and a little more on technology, and Harley Davidson puts more of a premium on their paints and fit and finishes and more traditional looks in a more ingrained fashion, if I could say that. The Indian motorcycles seem to have styling cues that are very obvious, like the lighting on top of a skirted fender and the Indian logo in multiple places on the bike. So it's not exactly subtle. And Harley has the advantage of having many years of model line development compared to what Indian's been able to do in recent years. So that may explain some of that. But again, I'm a fan of both brands. If I were to get an Indian, depending on what I wanted to do, I'd get the Challenger or the FTR. I would still pick my Street Glide Special over the Indian Challenger as I sit here today. But I mean, they're both great bikes. I just like how my Street Glide Special fits me. I like the looks of it. It's just a personal preference kind of thing. So please let me know your thoughts about these various bikes, my take on them. What's your take? What's your experience on these bikes? And please let me know in the comments section. Thanks very much, everyone.